Okay, well, I think this has been a very useful conference. I'll save the thanks for the end because there's still some issues I think we need to put on the agenda, if not resolve at this point, and which I know have been bothering the book forum members over the last 3 or 4 years. Many of those have come up already. So basically, let me try and just pull out the main themes. Firstly, local book publishers are the link between the local and the global. They indigenize our knowledge while valorizing it internationally. The stats are that books have grown 4% since 1995, that journals an 89% growth since 1995. That is largely due, I guess, to the DHET strategy actually working, an increase of journals and an increased number of articles, both locally and internationally. South Africa's contribution to world intellectual output is 0.01%. Got these from an SF report published a few years ago, but we have 7.1% of the citations worldwide. So, we've stamped our authority on the global situation. As has been pointed out by the previous speaker, the number of books that have been considered for accreditation have risen from 33 to 162 between 2005 and 2014. Okay, so why focus on this growth? When Jeremy Whiteman joined the scholarly publishing sector in 2010, he reports that the government and the academy were both highlighting the critical need to increase South African and African-led research within global measures. Both were acutely aware of the hegemony of the global north in knowledge production and the monopolization of academic research by a few global, in the boardroom sense, gigantic and wealthy companies. And the South African contribution to the global knowledge production then was below 0.6%. Published scholarly output is crucial for development innovation. China, for example, was frequently quoted back then, where remarkable growth, economic growth and strides in eradicating poverty were equated with equivalent strides in knowledge production. And at this particular time, SF embarked on deep studies and offered recommendations on the importance of scholarly book production. However, by the 2000s, an entire body of science in the form of scholarly book had become so minimalized, partly because of technicist performance measures in institutions that had excluded the book, until again that was rectified by DHET, I think in 2015, when books were brought into the system and chapters were recognized. So the SF studies set out the particular values and attributes of scholarly books, which are in the interests of not just the state and academia, but also of the general public. And that's one of SF's prime successes, is to communicate science beyond the academic constituencies into schools and other sites. So given the extraordinary progress in local scholarly book output that the later report underscored, it is particularly concerning that the Copyright Amendment Bill is in direct opposition to the strategic national asset. More aptly, instead of opening the door to and enabling this misdirected attention to sleight of hand copyright concerns, more effort was required on policy in line with the affirming results around the strengthening of the scholarly book publishing sector. I think the sector will survive one way or another, but it's under stress. And the discussions around the Copyright Amendment Bill have not been helpful to bringing stability or certainty into the picture. And so many presses are simply on idle, waiting to see what's going to happen, but at the same time planning with the publishing sector what to do should the bill not actually respond to the thousands of pages of recommendation that have been submitted by all the publishers and publishers associations, copyright lawyers and other experts. So the CAB wants to institutionalize authors in the educational sector as cost-free labor. In other words, the taxpayer pays again. The legacy publishers, in contrast, protect the author's intellectual property, offers services in perpetuity, metadata encoding, decoding, promotion. I was blown away by that this mid-afternoon section. I had no idea it was that complicated or that extensive or had that kind of reach or that kind of implication for all of us and every author involved in every journal or book. And via licensing agreements, return royalties for books to publishers and authors via licensing agencies. There might be an argument about the nature of these agreements, but those are business negotiations between institutions and over author contracts that may involve state intervention in discussions of the Big Five. Books and articles, whether open access or not, always need to be marketed, transitioned between formats, remarketed and copyright protected from fishers, predators, and pirates. And that's the problem. If we drop copyright, we open the door to all those predators who have taken over much of our academic enterprise. So the local scholarly publishers are few, and ironically, as pointed out by the previous speaker, they represent about 1/3 of the total scholarly output of the entire African continent. What happens here could change a lot of what happens to the north of us. And there should by now have been more effort around funding sustainable open access models, which are crucial to achieve dissemination and impact of locally generated original evidence-based knowledge. Since the bill started in its draft form in 2017, as I've indicated, uncertainty has resulted, and we need to actually address that elephant in the room. And it's got to be addressed in a dialogical way, which takes into account international agreements to which South Africa is a signatory, the concerns of the local presses, and that is the primary theme that comes out of every discussion that the forum, when we hold forum meetings. We're not being listened to. The arguments that have come out of this sector must please be taken into account. The small non-profit presses barely survive. Some have become inward-looking, and university funding officers, regrettably, because of the nature of the institution, the growth of the bureaucracies, the tick boxing, neoliberal frameworks that have been imposed on them, spend more time looking at balance sheets than actually providing sufficient guidance to authors to actually use their creativity, do what has been suggested by all the authors in here, all these speakers here, and take us to the next level. Yet the conference has exclusively highlighted the value offered by local publishers to the growth of local research in support of national policies. So local publishers enable a conversation between researchers in the global north and south. That's come through very strongly, much strongly than I actually realized it actually was. So the local content global impact idea that we put into the title of the conference is important. And somebody, I think it might have been Andrew, said real value must extend beyond producing an object. I think that's what we've done. If the citations are 7.1%, but our presence in the international scholarly framework is what did I say? I can't remember. Much smaller. Then we are succeeding to get beyond the object, because other scholars are recognizing the work that has been done here and the work that is coming out of South Africa. Okay, we all know that South African publishers and authors do attract financial return, and that these also flow to the south from the north, as does global knowledge exchange. There's a flow, mutually beneficial flow going on. It's not just an export of South African wealth to the north. The north buys our products, buys our books, buys our licenses, reproduces articles and chapters and books, and those funds come back to reinvigorate the South African political economy. Okay, I'm going to just jump a bit because we are running a little bit late. Okay, so The book forum has been galvanized this past year by the need to ensure that the scholarly publishing sector is protected, will grow, and will adapt to technological change and face down those elements of the bill that weaken local intellectual property and author and publisher rights. The forum's members, all of whom want to assure access to readers, that's another theme that's come thumping through. We might have different business models, different companies and different universities, but access, both in terms of authorship and readership, is high on the agenda. As Beth LaRue has tracked the open minds and closed systems of South African university publishers and has developed author profiles of these presses to address issues of discrimination in the selection of books for publication. Again, questions that have come up during this conference. But my question is, how will the Copyright Amendment Act, protect a level playing field? How will it address this question? In fact, it might exacerbate it because of the not really thinking through the implications of what it is trying to open, it might in fact close. And that's the unintended consequences of, for example, the Protection of Information Act. It completely went off the rails. So the Creative Industries Master Plan, being developed by the Small Business Development Department, is operating in a different model to the department that is piloting the Copyright Amendment Act. That wants to open everything up and allow the big tech to fish our intellectual property, and which they will then monetize in their own ways. Whereas the Department of Small Business Development imagines that the Copyright Amendment Bill will protect international property. And they don't want to deal with the contradiction between the two departments. There's no harmonization of legislation. So who's going to win out? Is it, you know, it becomes very confusing for investors, for universities to know whether to invest or to reinvest in their university presses, under what conditions, which department is going to hold sway in a year's time, 2 years' time. Will the act ever be redrafted? It needs a complete redraft by people who know what they're doing. So opening up copyright or getting rid of copyright doesn't help the educational sector, because all it's doing is asking authors and publishers to pay for subsidies that the state has failed to pay. So, you know, you can't ask one section to cover the shortfall. Why not ask, you know, the example earlier was that, you know, Taylor and Francis was part of the Big Five. It's actually the minnow in the Big Five, but nevertheless, let's take that as the example. They might be making these huge excess profits. But do we ask the question, what are our vice chancellors earning in relation to the lowest paid member of the university? We don't ask this question. We don't ask the question is, you know, why are we paying such a lot for data? A lot of that is tax. Books cost a lot because of shipping, VAT, and import duties. Nobody complains about those components of book pricing. They just blame the publisher. The publisher is one component in a value chain that accumulates as we engage in a international in trade and intellectual flows. So what can we do? First is the need to reach a reasonable compact on education that allows government to develop affordable first-class education without harming publishing and the wider knowledge and creative industries. Second is for universities to consider new models of funding university presses, especially in light of open access and new tech imperatives. I think we've heard some examples along that route, both from within universities and independently of universities. Third is for universities to consider intellectual property and the publishing sector as intellectual resources to be properly protected and leveraged for the good of the national economy. Fourth, academies and universities should be working with the organizations that serve the publishing industry and act as a watchdog on legal regimes that may harm it. And the book forum is a crucial resource towards these ends. And finally, I just want to say thanks to the scholarly publishing community in SF for getting this conference organized. It was put on the agenda about 2.5 months ago. I think most of us were academics, knowing that things always operate at a snail's pace, thought this was not going to happen. We were going to exhaust the unit, and then we'd be responsible for their funerals. We didn't also realize that at the same time that we were preparing for their funerals, that they were moving office and you know, dealing with other day-to-day issues. So Suzanne, Putty, all of the SF folks, you've done an extraordinary job. You've pulled it off. You've made it work, and I think it started off in a very collegial frame this morning. And I think we'll give you a week off to recover before we get back into the swing. You have no idea how hard these folks at the Scholarly Publication Unit work. You know, we're still emailing each other over weekends and 10 o'clock at night on pressing issues, and they come up all the time. Secondly, I'd like to thank Heta for designing the logo. That went back and forth, taking us into the future, and then to Sun Media, that's in the Rhodes operation, for actually implementing the design in a typeset version. A lot of thought has gone into this, as went into the provision of food. Regrettably, a number of delegates who said that they were coming did not turn up. I think we need to think about resource allocation. Okay, that food, I spoke to the caterer, it's not going to go to waste, but we are paying for that. SF is paying for that. And people who were invited at no charge to come along to the venue didn't turn up, and the result is a massive surplus of food, which other people will now benefit from, and I'm pleased that they're going to do that, and they're very happy. But we do need to think about, you know, being responsible, and if we can't make it, inform conference organizers, because they're paying for the tea, they're paying for the seat, they're paying for the food. They, you know, every delegate has a cost factor, and that cost factor that we could have saved, we could be spending on something else within SF. So my thanks to the delegates, especially those of you who did turn up. I think it's wonderful to start being able to connect again, although I see that we have a bit of an apartheid situation here, but I think it's because of this weird design where, you know, if you're in the middle, how do you get to the toilets, you know, without disrupting everybody? Now you're on camera. You know? So and to the people online, I know it's always difficult being online. I said that if I was to, as chairman of the forum, that I really did want to actually come and meet real people and have the opportunity to stumble in public rather than stumble behind my computer. And I think I've done that. So please make sure that you drive safely. I know I live in Cape Town, where the drivers are much more responsible. I'm actually scared of going back to Durban and also Johannesburg. So thanks again for employing this wonderful shuttle company that has gotten us all here safely and will get us back safely. Okay, I don't know, Suzanne, if you want to make any final remarks.
Just a final invitation then to please join us outside just for some last eats before we actually tackle this road. And again, thank you very much from SF point of view for everybody attending, as well as the online participants. And a big thank you to our National Scholarly Book Publishers Forum Committee Gosh, that's a long word. Just to thank them also for their enthusiasm. It has been a while since the Book Publishers Forum has done something, and I think this was a great impetus to moving us forward. So thank you, colleagues. Thank you, committee. Thank you for your enthusiasm, your collaboration, and your entrepreneurship. It was amazing with what you came up. Thank you very much. Thank you.